And now I'd like to introduce Detective Jason Rich with the Las Vegas Metro Police Department's Identity Crime. Jason, thank you for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me. So today we're going to talk about some of the financial crimes, not only stuff that we investigate, but also some ways to protect yourselves as business owners and some of the employee embezzlement type fraud. This is kind of a specific topic within financial crimes. There's so many different things that go from personal identity theft to counterfeit to fake checks to many of these things, but today we're going to focus mostly on kind of the employee theft, the embezzlement, and some of those things that we see when dealing with businesses. Before we get started, kind of what some of the schemes are, I wanted to go over some of the stats with fraud and forgeries. In 2014, Nevada was number 3 in the nation for having victims of fraud and forgery, and also about the number of, the amount of money that was lost during that year for fraud and forgery were in the top 5. The statistics kind of are compiled by our department, compiled by a couple different agencies, the Attorney General's office, and we determined that Nevada has about 60 victims of identity theft, fraud, or forgery a day in 2014. Nationally, it affects about 6,100 victims a day, and that was a little bit higher than 2013 with 5,100, and a little bit higher even over 2012, which had 4,700 victims. In the year 2014, which is the most current data we have, $1.7 billion in loss due to fraud and forgery alone. Most fraud and forgery is actually committed in low amounts. Most were paid or charged in the range of $100 to $500 only. But when you start adding it up, the amount of fraud it would take, $7 billion, is quite high. So we kind of want to get into a little bit of the employee theft. There's an agency that's kind of run by the FBI and kind of run through our Department of Justice. It's called the National White Collar Crime Center, and it estimates that employee theft can cost between $20 and $90 billion annually. There's kind of a quote that they put out and that our training officer puts out, and it says, the employee that you, quote, you trust the most will steal the most. And theft can occur at any level of an organization. Theft can occur from your lowest level employees, from taking money from the till all the way up to your high-end employees who are doing the managers and stuff that are taking money, or kind of, I don't want to say cooking the books, but changing what they're depositing and things. So we'll go over some of the fraud schemes for you. Fraud schemes are extremely costly to most businesses. A lot of these cases range from $10,000 to nearly $1 million per fraud scheme. One of the issues we have with dealing with fraud schemes is they can continue for months or even years before they are detected. It takes an average of about 18 months for the business owner to realize they are being defrauded by an employee, and for that employee to actually be caught, or at least prosecution to be started. But there are a few things that we can do in helping you detect fraud. Occupational fraud meaning employee fraud or embezzlement, is more likely to be detected by a tip than by any other method. So usually what happens is one employee finds out another employee is stealing, and that employee informs supervisor and informs the owner and lets you guys know what's happening with that. That's usually the way that we come across these things. Sometimes we come across them by the owner or the manager. They may hire somebody to come in and review their finances for them, especially at tax time. They start looking at finances and realizing that their accounts aren't reconciling, and they start looking in to see who had access to these accounts and who was able to obtain money and who was trusted with money and not to use it. When we talk about certain different crimes, I use the word embezzlement quite a bit. That's the official crime that we go with. And embezzlement is essentially money being taken by somebody who's entrusted with that money. So, for example, we have, so you work at a sporting goods store and you have a manager who their job every night is to count down the till, being that they empty all the money, load it in the safe, make sure that all their accounts reconcile from the day based on sales. Well, what they'll end up doing is that employee is entrusted with that money to make sure the money is correct. Well, they will start to take $20, $30, and it's usually a low end. And as they work their way up and they're not getting caught, they'll take more and more money. They may record that they deposited at the end of the night or that they put in the safe a certain amount of money, but that money isn't actually in there. They've taken some of it, and it continues to go on. So embezzlement is anything really that we find that is employee-type theft, that somebody's entrusted with your money or entrusted with the money of your business, and they take advantage of that trust. When it comes to some of the bigger businesses, high-level employees do the most damage. They provide the statistic that the average loss among fraud among frauds committed by owners and executives is $570,000. The average loss caused by managers, being middle management, somewhere in that range is $180,000, and the average loss caused by kind of your frontline employees is around $60,000. Now, obviously, that's all averages. This can change depending on what your business is or what you guys are up to, but that's the statistics that the White Collar Crime Center put out. Small businesses kind of face an increased risk. They usually suffer, on average, a percentage of their losses are much higher from their total revenue. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that they don't employ as many anti-fraud controls. They're expensive sometimes to run through your bank. They're expensive to have an accountant that's constantly reading your books for you. And there's just certain anti-fraud measures that small businesses just sometimes can't afford to put in place. So the biggest thing that we're kind of pointing out to you is it's your business, it's your money, and I think that you have you being the primary stakeholder have the kind of obligation to your business and yourself to make sure that even if you trust, your cousin, your daughter, whoever's running it, friends, family, or any employees that you think have good background, that you should still be checking your own accounts to make sure they reconcile. Check the deposits against what is being said is being deposited. Check the deposits against the actual amount in your account. Many times you'll find these are different, and maybe not all the time, but you can on occasion do that. We've had issues with a lot of small businesses that aren't focused maybe on revenue, doctors' offices, lawyers' offices, things like that are a little more focused on providing a service. They'll hire a manager, somebody to manage that money for them and to make sure that, say, co-pays are taken in or retainer fees are taken in, but they never follow up. Months later, they never follow up to make sure that the amount that was taken in or the customer says that they applied is actually given to them. That's something that we really try to prevent the fraud as opposed to once it's happened, try and prosecute it. For us, it's much easier to prevent it from happening than it is to try and prosecute and have the court order to get money back if there's any to be given back. So some of the fraud schemes that we deal with in the business realm, I'm just going to list a few off here and then I'll go into more detail. You got creating a false vendor account, creating phantom employees, stealing a large lump sum of money, stealing small amounts over time, under-reporting income or under-reporting money taken in for co-pays, forging checks, and misuse of credit cards. Of all those fraud schemes, the biggest ones that we see, at least in this valley and with the small businesses, is stealing small amounts over time, under-reporting their income, and then misuse of company credit cards. Those kind of seem to be the big ones. They create false vendor accounts, and they pay those out to, who it turns out to be their husband, boyfriend, girlfriend's account, and they say they're a vendor for whatever service that was never provided and was never authorized by the business owner. The stealing small amounts over time, that just grows and grows and grows, and over several months, 18, 20 months, it ends up being several $1,000s that your business isn't seeing, that you may assume is in your business account, but it doesn't happen to be. So we want to make sure that you just stay on top of your own business accounts. The misuse of credit cards, those are a little easier. They're entrusted with the credit card, and those are easy for us to prosecute. I just need to make sure that when you hire somebody, you give them a credit card, that they have something written by you guys or by the owner or manager, whoever's in charge of those things, to say this is what the card is to be used for, this is what it's not to be used for. And if it's to be used for something outside of that, they would need some sort of prior approval from you, the business owner, the manager, whoever's in charge of that. That helps us with prosecution for the fraudulent use of a credit card or the embezzlement, because we have to be able to prove that the person knew they weren't supposed to be using it for that, and instead they intended to use it for that. And it makes it easier for us to be able to recoup your funds. It makes it easier for you to contact your bank and get those funds returned to you by the bank, because the bank is not always willing to just give away their money, even if you've had a good account with them. So if you have those kind of fraud measures in place, when the credit cards are issued to employees, it allows them to go ahead and do a charge back to the original business. They don't take a loss as your bank, and you won't take a loss as the employer. Some of the easiest ways, theft is the easiest. They don't hide their actions. They kind of just, they're easy to do. They'll take money right from the tills. The other kind of fraud that we deal with is deception. These are kind of the more experienced people. They will cover their tracks. These are the ones that create the vendor accounts. These are the ones that create the counterfeit or the forged POs or purchase orders. These are the ones that kind of create other businesses to steal money from your business as employees. And then there's also the combined approach where they start to steal from the till, they start to steal from the money they're responsible for depositing or taking in for co-pays and retainer fees and those, and they start to learn that they can take money there, and they start looking for ways that they can take more money, and that turns into the deception aspect of it, and they start creating these more complex type of crimes, and it makes it harder and harder for us to investigate and prove some of these the further along that they get. But when we talk about theft, when we talk about the kind of the base for just stealing cash, like I said, little controls, and it takes a longer time, so you end up with larger losses. 18, 20 months, you're not realizing they're taking $50, a pay period out of your till. And in a till, there's actually a term that we use, till tapping. It's fairly common. That's where they're taking money from the register. It's an easy thing for us to prove with video. It's easy to prove now with all the digital registers. This is how much you had in sales. This is how much you're supposed to take it in. This is how much that employee specifically took, or the employee was supposed to have. And when you counted down their machine when they checked out, that's they're missing $20, $30, $40, and it becomes a consistent thing. Another big one that we deal with, and this usually involves 2 or more people, is the return scams. Somebody will buy a product, and then they will have they'll put in there that the product was returned, and so they issue the money out of the machine. It's to fool the machine that there's not as much money in there, and instead of taking the return, they just pocket the money, and there actually is no product to be returned. This happens quite a bit, and it just depends on the kind of controls you guys have to see if a manager needs to come in and approve a return, or if there's somebody there that can take the time to go over and make sure the product is being returned as it is, and it's not just a phantom return where they're pocketing that money and you're out the product, and now you're out the money as well. And then the employees who handle gift and store cards, this is false returns of merchandise. It's kind of the return thing where they're crediting gift cards or store cards used for additional purchases. There was a very large retailer in town that was having this issue for quite some time. They would have employees go through cash registers of their friends and their other employees, and they were doing phantom returns, and they were loading them onto store charge cards, and cause that's the way this business would operate most of their returns, with store credit, and then they would either turn and buy more things with those and never had a product to return, or they would go ahead and sell those store card and gift cards for less than face value. They make money because the only money that's being lost is your money. So those are kind of just the lower level theft things you can do, especially in a retail business or somebody where there's somebody in control taking cash in and out. Those are some of the scams and some of the problems that we see when we run into those issues with retail. And then going back to the other one, deception, I'm going to go ahead and kind of read this PowerPoint for you guys. It says, policy, all cash returns of merchandise must be approved by a manager. Beat the system, use return in conjunction with a layaway system, and get cash from layaway cancellation at a later date. And then the other one is all returns over $50 must be approved by a manager. Solution, lots of $49.99 or less returns. This is just ways that your employees are realizing that there's little loopholes in your system here or there. Like I said, the threshold for management is 50 and over. They find items that are $49.99 and they'll return stacks of those items and take the gift cards or the cash out themselves. It's a little more sophisticated. They're learning how to kind of maximize what they're going to get and maximize the theft from you. These all come in some of those scams where they start doing the false and phantom POs. They create companies that you're paying out as an employee for whatever vendor service that you think you're getting, and when it shows up in your books and you're not sure what it is, you assume that the manager or the employee was able to, got a purchase or a service from somebody, and that business doesn't exist. I've had an actual case where that's happened. Somebody was paying their husband's account, created a company using their husband's name that did absolutely nothing, wasn't relevant to anything, and started creating POs and writing $3,000, $4,000 checks to that company that didn't exist, and went right into the guy's own checking account. So that's something that you guys want to be aware of. Make sure you know who your vendors are, who you're paying them out, and even if you have a manager who's responsible for all those things, I think it would behoove you as an owner, or it would behoove any business owner to look through their vendor sheets once a month, make sure they can identify who these vendors are, make sure they meet with their managers on regular basis to make sure that they know what businesses they're doing with, hey, we lost an account, or we got a better deal at this, this gate supply place, so we're not using our old one anymore, and here's why. I think that is one of the things that will help you guys to understand, or help anybody that runs a business to kind of limit their exposure to fraud through the employee theft and through embezzlement. And then our training officer kind of created this, talked about some of the combo stuff as well, where the employee starts using deception, doesn't get caught, gets lazy and goes straight to theft, or kind of goes vice versa. Starts using theft, gets caught, apologizes, reimburses, and keeps the job to pay it off. And then turns to deception because all the money they were taking was helping to fuel a lifestyle that they couldn't afford, and they start to steal again. And one of the ways to combat this is just to keep talking with them, keep dealing with your employees, kind of have an active role out on your floor or out on your business or with whoever's taking in money, and make sure that they feel like they are maybe not being micromanaged, but that your money is definitely important to you and that you're watching out for those kind of things. They will change fraud schemes sometimes as they see fit. And to be honest with you, the vast majority of employees are honest employees. They're the ones that come in, they want to do their job, they get paid for what they do, and they're ready to go home at the night, and they're vested in their job. But the very few that do decide that they want to take your money cause a huge amount of damage and headache to your business. And we want to make sure that this is prevented prior to us being able to prosecute these things. Prevention for us is much easier. And then just real quick on the investment fraud. Don't judge a person by their website. Don't invest in anything. Be cautious. Inquire about all the terms and conditions. Have a written contract. And then the old adage, it's kind of cliche, but it's absolutely true when it comes to fraud. If it is too good to be true, it almost always is. I've been doing fraud investigations for 8 years for our department, and it's still kind of amazed at some of the things that people were willing to give their money away with little or no guarantees, with little or no safeguards, and with little or no information about what they're actually paying into. This is your money, and it absolutely behooves you to keep it and to invest it as you see fit and to make sure that somebody's not going to defraud you out of that. Once you have discovered fraud, and we don't really have a slide on here, so I'm just going to go over it with you guys. Once you have found fraud or you have found an employee who you think is maybe stealing from you, in order to further prosecution from us, we kind of require a lot more work out of the business owner or the victim, whoever it may be, than we kind of normally would. And this comes from us, this comes from the district attorney, because we have to prove it all at once. A lot of the things are, we may not arrest a person right away. We get a lot of things where they'll find out that they're stealing from you, say you own a tire business, and they're stealing from your till, they're till tapping you, and they have been, and you caught them in the act of doing it, and you call police to come out. There's often times the police will come out, they'll call one of the detectives, and we'll ask that they go ahead and, that's more than within your rights to fire that employee and to terminate them and to, revoke any credit cards or keys that they may have. And then we let that person walk. And I understand the frustration that we feel as a detective of not, essentially allowing the bad guy to walk away. However, the way that it works is if we don't if we prosecute on that one crime for embezzlement, we essentially cannot go back and look at the last 8 months of video showing that person didn't take just $50 today. They took a total of $3,000 over the last 8 or 9 months. We cannot go back now and charge them for those things with the way that our law is written for the most part and the way the DA likes to prosecute them. It's kind of a one bite at the entire apple thing. So we want to make sure that this thing is properly investigated, because if we submit for only $300 and you find out you've been victimized for substantially more than that, it's much more difficult for us to tack that on at the end. So we want to make sure that that's something that we come across as in a business. You want them kind of brought to justice right away, but the patience is the key, because we're able to investigate these. We have to get account statements. We have to get video surveillance. We have to subpoena their accounts to prove the money was going into an account. If they were doing that, there's a lot of things that we want to do to make sure that this case gets the maximum value back for the business owner, and that the employee who committed this fraud against you kind of gets the penalty that they're deserving of taking. So that's something to consider when you call and ask and are curious as to why we haven't arrested somebody immediately. That's usually the reason why. We'll be in contact with you. You can call us anytime, and the next slide over will show you all of our contact information. Feel free to contact us anytime you can. We're able to walk you through the steps of dealing with fraud and embezzlement. It's something that's continuing to hit us in the Valley, and it's just a lot of these things are preventable just through kind of some safeguards and business practices. It's your money is the most important thing to you. It's important to us that you keep it. And it's important that you're able to kind of thrive in this economy. It's something that we live off of here. And so we would like you guys to take kind of those steps in making sure that your money is going where it's supposed to be, and no matter how trusted your employee may be, they know, understand, and that you understand that you're still going to look at the money. You're still going to make sure that everything they're doing is up. It's not personal, it's business, and that's kind of something for everyone to understand. And so our information is on this slide here. You can call that main office, 828-3483. That will get you to any of these sections. We handle not only the embezzlement and the employee fraud, but we handle kind of everything. We do credit cards, counterfeit checks, counterfeit currency. If you guys would like more information, you can email that email at the bottom, the identity crime section at lvmpd.com, and you can just throw my name, Detective Rich, into the subject line. And just kind of let you know, we do lots of different classes for lots of different things. We do personal, how to protect your personal finances a little bit from different types of skimmers and credit card things, and we do all sorts of things for groups. So I'm more than willing to hand out whatever information we have to kind of protect you, because at the end, if you protect yourselves, it keeps us free to kind of go after some of the bigger stuff, and it kind of keeps our caseload down, so we're really helping each other out by doing these things. And I'm more than willing to help, and any questions you guys may have, go ahead and feel free to ask now.
Again, if you have a question, you can type into the chat box in the bottom left corner of the screen, or you can unmute your line by pressing *7 on your phone. I had one quick question, and it might not make sense. If somebody has embezzled from your business, do you, as a business owner, are you allowed to reprimand them directly, or would you recommend them like filing a complaint with the identity crimes detail before?
That really just kind of depends on you and what your preference is as a business owner. We usually prefer, if we get a call and we go out, that employee isn't retained. That's one of the big things they'll say, I'll work here to pay it off, take it out of my paycheck. That's, like I said, a lot of times that leads to just more fraud on your behalf. We try and get you some relief financially through the courts. You can reprimand that employee, because either way, it's not going to matter. If we show up, our recommendation is usually to terminate that employee to begin with. So if you release that employee or terminate that employee, it's not going to change our investigation as far as what we're going to do. We would rather have you stop it, and if that's letting that person go and stopping the crime, then we're more than willing to deal with it that way, because it's still going to require us to get bank statements and everything else. So we don't need that person there necessarily at that point in time when we show up to have to deal with that.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in, but again, if you guys want to ask any questions to Detective Rich, is there a way to know if they have had issues outside of checking with the Better Business Bureau vendors?
A lot of the vendor stuff that we've kind of dealt with more, I'm pretty sure you can check with the Secretary of State. You can look at their business licensing through there. It'll tell you what status that is in, if it's been revoked, if it's been suspended. It'll tell you if it's been revoked or suspended in the past. If that's the case, you may want to kind of look and see what their track record is. A lot of vendors, too, that we've dealt with, and people don't do it, hey, do you have a couple different companies that you use or that use you as a vendor that I can contact? If it's a good business, I would be more than happy to provide you with 3, 4, 5 different businesses that recommend me, because word of mouth is obviously one of the strongest marketing tools out there when it comes to these. A lot of the stuff that we deal with is the spoof vendors, where somebody just makes up a vendor company for their spouse, and they start depositing money into there, hoping that you don't see it as their spouse, you see it as their vendor, or a vendor providing a service to you. But I would do the Secretary of State, look up there to see if they've had any any citations against them. You can also Google their business license if they operate in the county or the city. There's some information that's provided there as well. Better Business Bureau is a great place. They gather quite a bit of information, and then just contact them and ask for references depending on what vendors they are. They're all going to have several different companies that use them.
All right, well, it looks like we're ready to wrap up. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to thank Detective Rich, the Las Vegas Metro Police Department, and again, Chamber U happens every Friday morning. Check our website for more information, and thank you again.
No problem, thank you.